Welcome everybody. It's deer again this week, but it's fallow deer this time. In last week's episode of Wildlife Wednesday, I spoke of Ireland's only indigenous species of deer, the red deer, which also happens to be Ireland's largest land mammal. So for this week's episode, I thought I'd stay on the subject of deer, but talk about a different species this time, fallow deer, which, although not native, is the most widespread species in the country. I also spoke about fallow deer back in episode 17 of Wildlife Wednesday, when I talked about the herd in the Phoenix Park here in Dublin. And I often wonder, despite the fact that Dubliners in particular and Irish people in general love the deer of the Phoenix Park, how much do we actually know about them and how they came to be here? Well, let's take a little jump across the Irish Sea and delve a little deeper into the history of the deer and the relationship between them and our nearest neighbours in Britain. Following the Norman conquest of England in the 11th century, deer parks became extremely popular throughout Britain, and the majority of them were created between 1200 and 1350, and these parks flourished under the Normans. And it's generally believed that at the height of their popularity, there were somewhere in excess of 3,000 of these deer parks right across England, Scotland and Wales. These Norman parks were the forerunner of the deer parks that became popular amongst England's landed gentry. They varied in size from small fields of no more than a few acres to huge estates of great country houses, with thousands of acres supporting large herds of deer. They were multifunctional spaces used mainly for hunting, but they also provided food and resources for building and fuel, containing as they did a mixture of woodland and grazing pasture. Now that these deer parks were well established and thriving in Britain, it was almost inevitable that the first Irish deer park would be established. And so it was that a herd of deer was introduced to the Royal Deer Park in Glencree, County Wicklow in 1244. We then jump forward 400 years to the time in 1662 when James Butler, Duke of Ormond, established a Royal Deer Park here in Dublin, in the Phoenix Park. And the fallow deer herd we all know and love today contains many descendants of that original herd from 3.5 centuries ago. So what of the deer in the 21st century? Why is there still a herd of wild deer in the largest enclosed park within any capital city in Europe? The answer to these and other frequently asked questions can be found on the website of the Office of Public Works, which is responsible for the day-to-day operation of the park. It also has a list of guidelines which it advises the public to pay careful attention to for their own safety and for the protection and well-being of the deer. But to answer this question as to why there is still a herd of wild deer in the Phoenix Park, I'll quote directly from the OPW's website, which says the following. The wild deer herd has become an integral part of the biodiversity in the Phoenix Park over 350 years. Getting rid of the herd would have a major impact on the biodiversity of the park, including changing wildlife habitats. Well, I can think of no better reason for maintaining the herd in the park, so that's good enough for me. But it's also worth remembering that the deer in the park are a great tourist attraction and a great learning resource when teaching our children about the biodiversity of the park. One of the highlights of the year for me is visiting the park during the annual fallow deer rut to photograph these beautiful creatures. But unfortunately this year, mainly due to COVID-19 and the restrictions it has placed on the whole country, I only had one opportunity to do this before we went back into lockdown. but at least I did get my one day in the park. And before I go, I'd like to offer a little advice to those of you who might at some stage in the future get an opportunity to witness the rut. Be extremely careful. Always remember the advice given by the Office of Public Works. Fallow deer are wild animals and should be treated as such. Do not approach any closer than 50 meters or 55 yards under any circumstances. Do not feed the deer. And if you want to photograph them, use the longest lens you can so you can maintain a safe distance between you and the deer. Remember, this is not just for your benefit, but the animals also. Today's slideshow is made up of the photographs I did get a chance to capture on my one and only visit to the park during this year's rut. I hope you enjoy it. Well, thanks again for watching Wildlife Wednesday, folks. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. And if you did, I'd be grateful if you'd give it a like and subscribe to my channel. And when you do, don't forget to ring the bell so you're notified every time I upload new content. Till next week, stay safe, stay healthy, wash your hands and wear a mask where necessary, while continuing to maintain social distancing. We're not out of the woods yet. Take care, folks. Bye.